Hey everyone, we are here with Sean talking about human pilots, his company, and everything AI. So, Sean, where are you calling in from?
Hey everyone, thanks Reed. I'm calling in from Atlanta.
Perfect. So, tell us a little bit about your company. Give us a little bit of background on, how long you guys been running and just what are you bringing to market?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company's called Human Pilots AI. It's human driven. We experiment and we build AI for other companies. We're a professional management consulting company. We are advising leaders and their teams. Been around for a couple years, right after ChatGPT came out in late 22. Started this up based on some of the previous experience I'd had 10 years ago with AI. So I've seen it through a few iterations. I've seen where it can succeed and where people often fall short. And it turns out that, in any big transformation like we're going through now, up to like 75% of those don't actually meet their business objectives. And with AI, it's even a higher failure rate with, up to 90% of the AI initiatives going on don't meet their goals. And so that's a big problem. And I've been able to see what can work, and I want to bring that to market. And that's what I've been working with leaders and their teams.
Perfect. So, AI means a lot of things to a lot of people. And every day I turn around and there's a new, I wouldn't say new model, but there's a new startup kind of working on this.
Hmm.
When customers are coming to you and saying, I want to get into AI, but I don't know where to start, like, what's your thinking? And like, how do you typically work with a customer from the starting blocks to say, where are you, where you need to be?
Yeah. Yeah, there's basically three entry points where I start to engage with customers. It's either where do we get started? How do we scale? We've tried some experiments, but they haven't really, we're not sure how to grow it across the company. And then where do we find the value? We've done these experiments, but where's the proof? How do we measure it? How do we scale it and get going? So with getting started, we start always with the readiness assessment. It's like an AI audit where we look across their business, and it's what's the condition of their data, what's their data governance and management look like. Interesting with generative AI, a big percentage, 80% of the use cases are with non-technical people. So we want to look at their culture and the way that their people are working currently. It has a series of questions that we go through in this audit, but it's important to understand their risk profile and where are they willing to dive in, and where can we find some high impact, low risk opportunities for starting to pilot and learning.
And when users are kind of coming to you and saying, I want to solve a huge problem and I think AI can do it, how do you balance the desire to move swiftly and to either increase top line growth or have a significant impact on bottom line growth? Like, how are you coaching your customers and prospects of like what's realistic?
Yeah, so that's a big value prop that I lean into, is being very realistic and pragmatic. Because I've seen a few rounds of this, I know where people get overly excited and they start promoting it that's going to solve all of the world's problems. And unfortunately, that's set a lot of leaders up to think that it's going to, magically push a button. It's going to, cure their pain. But it's not set up like that. There's a lot of dependencies that we have to evaluate. So when someone comes and wants to do something big, that's great. We love big, ambitious ideas. We say think big, but start small. And so, that's where the piloting and learning comes in. You have to do that through small, rapid iterations. And so we would want to look and set the vision for what the big goal is, what the big initiative is, and then build out that strategic roadmap of how we grow into it.
Yeah, and one of the things is part of the prep call and kind of dialogue that we've had over the last, I think, 2 years on this one is how do you coach folks on the balance of technology versus the change management, and what are you seeing, and what's the guidance you're giving to your customers
Yeah.
in prepping for this? And over the last 2 years is just the changing philosophy of how much spend should be devoted to the technology and the AI, and then how much should be spent on change management. What is your thinking in terms of either percentage or framework that someone should be using?
Yeah, so this is where people get into trouble in the early phases of planning. Typically, with digital transformation, it was, uh, a dollar for technology and maybe 50 cents for training and change management, if you're lucky. But that was still pretty ambitious. But again, remember, a lot of those digital transformations failed. So with AI, the bigger firms like McKinsey are saying, it's for every dollar on tech, you have to spend five on the change management side. And what's become very apparent recently is that much more work is needed on the change management. And that's where I've pivoted the human pilots focus, is that we're doing a lot more change management now. McKinsey even recently said for every dollar on tech, you need to spend $20 on the change management, the people and the process and the operations side. I mean, that is, you know, I have not heard any executive get excited about that statistic, but that's the reality that they're saying. If you want to listen to McKinsey, but I am saying it is a significant number because most companies aren't set up to be as nimble and adaptive as they should be to make these changes.
My assumption is as soon as McKinsey put out that study, soon thereafter they sent out a white paper about their change management group. But I kid.
I'm
So,
sure.
talk to me a little bit about what, as GPT and ChatGPT 3.0 came out 2 years ago, like what were some of the initial things that
Mhm.
people are really excited about? And how has that changed over time? And what are you seeing more? Is it a certain industry that you're getting more phone calls about? Is it a certain function? Like, what are folks really excited to solve now?
Yeah, I mean, so all of the areas where generative AI had the early promises was on productivity gains. How are they going to save time on task? How are we going to make quicker decisions based on, faster access to insights and data? What we saw was the employees were more engaged when you brought them in and spent some training time with them, but that doesn't always happen. The training and upskilling is a big part of what's going to happen in the change. And so that's an area of opportunity. The cost reduction is always a top line big piece. Innovation is an opportunity, but that hasn't come out as much with the legacy companies. And then improving the customer experience is something that we know can be done. Where companies don't hire in, outside help, they might try to, start with a customer service piece like a chatbot, but we've seen clearly where they can run into trouble because what the chatbot puts out there, they are, can be legally held accountable for some of these things. So, that's where some of the back and forth has come.
Yeah, I think it was you or someone else told me that one of these chatbots was giving away free cars at a car dealership website.
Yeah,
So don't want it to do that. In terms
right.
of processing and talking to your customers, your process that is, how do you
Mhm.
talk to your customers about how they should think about balancing moving fast and a risk profile? What's the sort of framework that you're using with your customers?
Yeah, so part of that early analysis of understanding where they are is just that risk assessment analysis. It's pretty comprehensive to identify any potential threats or vulnerabilities they might have with the implementation. So, what exposure might they have? What can we do to prevent that? What are their privacy, data security concerns with, there's intellectual property issues. There can be regulatory and compliance issues, a lot of cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We want to make sure if it's a more public, high profile brand that they're not running into any misinformation or harmful content uh, impact. But, we're assessing the impact. We're looking at the risk management framework that goes hand in hand with the change management. But how are we going to implement that across the company? What kind of governance do we need with AI usage? Any control measures? Responsible AI is a big piece of this. That's where companies, if they don't put that in their early policy, which is a must-have, making sure that they're doing things that are transparent and they're holding accountability and they're doing what's right for their people and the communities they're in, ultimately what's right for the business, and it'll keep them out of trouble in the long run. Just being transparent, having the data explained and how those decisions were being made, and then documenting what's been going on. That's a big piece of what we have to go through. The name of my company is Human Pilots. We're very bullish on the human must be fully engaged, so having that human oversight. I've not seen any use case where a company has gone completely over to AI and been successful. There are some manufacturing and some other cases where it's heavily used, but there's always human oversight. we've been, autonomous vehicles have been around they've been being developed for 20, 30 years. They're still not completely on the road. So they're starting to be now with Waymo, but, there's heavy oversight. It's not, we're not ready to just hand the keys over completely just yet.
Interesting. As the AI continues to get better and the technology gets better and better, like what are you doing to sort of upskill yourself and help your customers think about what's should they be thinking about next and how technology plays a role in that?
Yeah. So luckily, one of my character traits is that I'm very curious. I don't like school, but I like to learn. So always reading. I study, and I am constantly talking to, scientists and researchers and evaluating their work. And I talk to a lot of universities about how they're teaching their students. As we think about learning a new process in business, it's interesting to look at how schools are teaching their students because it's the next wave of our workforce, of our leaders. And so that's been a really interesting shift in my journey with human pilots is that, I never really worked at the university or K through 12 systems before, but they have a huge need, and they are investing for the long term, and so how do we teach that? There's a lot of opportunity with personalized learning, that you can curate it for the people in the company. You would, create a more custom training for somebody in marketing versus somebody in HR or operations. But, with the personalized learning, it also factors in that people learn differently. Where some people are more auditory or they learn better by reading or by doing, I see that we have to take a pretty active approach of all these things. And then where I find leaders or companies fall short is that they might, sign up for a class and ask the employees to take it. Maybe it's a few rounds of a video type training. It doesn't really work. It just hasn't worked. It has to be hands-on. It has to be that experiential. How do they connect it to a real life use case, a real life workflow? How would they integrate it in their work? And that is where the more tailored, customized consulting work that I do comes in.
Interesting. As you're starting to have, a diverse client range, have you started to identify personality traits that either are overly ambitious or that are more risk adverse, and kind of like how are you guiding those sponsors as they're thinking about how much of the apple to bite off or not to bite off?
Right. That is such a good question because I find that the mindset going in is so important. So, if we see, mission-driven organizations, they're all kind of rallied around the same unified goal. And more, larger corporate, they might have different drivers or incentives for what they're doing in different parts of the company. For somebody that's overly ambitious, we want to kind of tamper it down and be very realistic about what is achievable because they would be, potentially disappointed. There's been so many big AI investments that haven't paid off as fast as they may want. This is a longer term play, but there are short term gains that can be realized. So we want to, make sure in the roadmap that we're developing that we have those short term wins, but we're going to create that long term value. For people that are too skeptical, that are quite frankly fearful, there's a surprising amount of psychology and emotional components at play here with AI adoption in companies because, if people are uninformed, if they are unexperienced, or they don't have the exposure to AI, they just know it is two letters. Now those two letters encompass all sorts of technologies that are, realized all over our life, but just because of how much press and attention it's gotten recently, people are concerned that if it can do this well, it might take away my livelihood. And I don't have this exposure as a leader who has been rewarded for doing something very well over, perhaps decades. This represents a change that they may not be comfortable with. And for most people, change is very uncomfortable, but that's where growth happens. And so, part of my job as the coach is to encourage them that, to show them the small wins, to help them, get on the bike and start to pedal. Everyone kind of understands how a bike works, but until you get on it and start to balance and move your feet around, you don't get the hang of it. So helping them get on and start to work with it themselves.
I have to imagine you have to be pulling out the change management curve diagram from time to time and remind people where they are in the journey. Kind of two last questions for you. You know, how do you see over the next, 2 to 5 years, how do you see consulting evolving as its use of AI as a delivery mechanism, as well as
Hmm.
capability?
Great question. I believe one of the biggest areas of opportunity in the AI era now is going to be in the service. In fact, with all of the AI agents that are coming about, you're going to be you're going to be hearing a lot more about this service as a subscription. We're creating this service that it's going to be doing some of the workflows. Early on, I had a few of the management consulting companies come to me and hire me to help them build out a practice or help them think about it. Where the established companies are running into trouble is that their structures have the same legacy problems as businesses, existing businesses have, where their incentives, their hourly billing, all of the processes that they have in place is preventing them from moving and being as adaptable as they need to be for their clients. But as long as they can move a little faster, they can still provide value. So being able to execute and charge the rates that they've been doing is a really big concern for them. And so that's where you'll start to see some new business models coming out from the bigger firms. And then as the smaller upstarts like myself, we'll have different, incentive models and payment structures.
It'll be very interesting to see how we move from a time and materials or hourly bill rate to outcome based, you know,
Right.
through this work. In terms of clients or prospective folks that would like to work with you outside of the website, which I'll put in the show notes, how do people get in touch with you and kind of, you already mentioned sort of the assessment. Like, how would someone get started with you?
Yeah, just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Sean Wood. You Google Sean Wood AI, you'll find me. Uh, humanwebsites.ai is the URL. Just reach out. We make it pretty
Perfect.
easy.
Perfect. Well, Sean, thank you for taking time and look forward to hearing from you in a couple years and seeing how kind of AI consulting changes and evolves.
Great. Thanks, Reed.
Bum, bum, bum.